Thank you for joining us this afternoon for content freedom, content management strategies that support patient acquisition. I'm Vera Hunt Thompson, Director of Consulting for Greystone.net, and I'll be going over some housekeeping items before we begin today's presentation. During the webinar, we will take questions from attendees, and you can do that by using the toolbox on the right side of your screen. And due to the size of our audience, attendees are in listen mode only to cut down on background noises. And we would really appreciate your feedback on a short survey at the end of the webinar today. I'd like to welcome our speaker, Michael Kincaid, CTO, for reason one. And Michael, I'll turn it over to you to get started today.
Cool. Cheers. Okay, so ubiquitous question. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So I'll just give you a little bit about myself. First, I'm from Northern Ireland, which is why you might be picking up a little bit of an accent. I've been working in digital for just over 20 years. Started as a software developer, then a whole bunch of different web developer roles, then director of development. And I've been a CTO now for the past 9 years. In terms of who we are at Reason One, we're a fully remote and full service digital agency headquartered in Charleston, South Carolina. We've got people throughout the US and also in Canada and in Ireland as well. Behold, here's our smiling faces. We're a team of 42 experts with 23 years of experience and oodles of, projects and awards under our belt. Now, what gets, this fine bunch of people up in the morning is that we use our business as a force for good. And if you condensed our mission down into one phrase, it's really, helping those who do good, do better. And that's a mission that influences all aspects of our business from, how we work to who we work with. So for example, in terms of how we work as a business, we're a certified B Corporation, and that's a status that ensures our business practices, account for our social and environmental impact. In terms of what we create, we strongly believe that the web is for everyone. So we create inclusive solutions for the widest range of audiences. And in doing so, we've developed real expertise in practices such as accessibility. In fact, our agency has trained other agencies how to make their sites and their digital apps more accessible. So training the competitors. Other ways we use our business as a force for good really is through investing in the communities we live in. So through volunteering, which, we give our staff time off for, or pro bono investments, all done to support causes that we're passionate about. And one cause we're very passionate about is diversity, equity, and inclusion in tech. Tech being an industry that has pretty poor stats here. And this is an important cause that we are invested in improving through things like our mentorship and scholarship program. In terms of, how our mission to help those who do good, do better influences who we work with, healthcare is, the primary industry that we focus and work on. And over the years, we've been in business. We've been a vital partner to healthcare brands and organizations. And that has meant helping, health systems such as some of our clients here face disruption and consumerization head on. In terms of, how we've done that, it's, being through practices such as digital road mapping or continuous improvement and delivering much needed digital transformation. So ultimately, really it's modernization to deliver on the evolving needs of patients. And these are considerations that we're now going to talk about. So let's get into it and discuss, content management strategies that support patient acquisition. So patient acquisition, obviously being one of, if not the desired outcomes of many of the digital marketing tactics that, that we do online, tactics that need to evolve as the digital behaviors of patients evolve. And this is why we'll start by looking into really how patient behaviors have changed online. So in the pre-pandemic world, if you remember those times, healthcare had very much settled into, patient-centered relationship with an approach that, the focus is on the patient's individual needs, their preferences and values. And healthcare professionals remain the primary decision makers, but they consider the patient more fully when suggesting things like treatments or interventions. Primary goal here is to improve patient satisfaction and health outcomes and the overall quality of care by centering the care process around the patient. Post-pandemic, arguably caused by the pandemic, we now see the rise of a patient-led experience within healthcare, not a replacement for a patient-centered experience, but obviously an extending from that. And here patients really take a more active and leading role in their healthcare decisions. So essentially steering the healthcare journey. Patients are not just partners, but really becoming like the primary drivers of many decisions regarding their health. So they may seek professional advice, but they ultimately decide on the interventions, treatments, or health paths that they wish to follow for certain types of conditions, especially sort of chronic conditions. And your next prospective patient really now wants to be empowered, to take more responsibility for their health and to be more autonomous in their health care decisions. And this has led, to patients approaching healthcare with a more consumer mindset. And with this mindset comes really new expectations for what they can do online to manage their health and their healthcare relationships. So let's take a closer look, at the behaviors and expectations of today's patients. So whether, they're looking for a new provider or trying to get more information on treatment, looking to fact check something, that they've heard on social, online, most patients' journeys start with search. In fact, 77% of patients use search engines in, their patient journey, which, this translates to about 7% of Google's daily searches are health related, according to Google's vice president, David Feinberg. And that's a whopping 70,000 healthcare searches are performed every minute. And it's not just search. Just as we compare, products on Amazon as we're shopping, today's patients are going online to evaluate and compare any potential healthcare partner. And they increasingly do this, by looking at ratings with sites like RateMD shown here. So even with healthcare, we trust the lived experience of fellow patients and how they rate the providers that they've used. So 90% of patients use online reviews to access their providers, and 88% of patients read reviews about a provider, even after a referral, basically because once you've got the referral, you want to check them out. And this content, this referral information, or this rating information, is being generated and increasingly generated. So 40% of patients between 30 and 44 years old, just fit into there, are posting doctor reviews online, like they're sharing their experience online. And ratings aren't the only way in which, we can share our healthcare experiences or we're even, look to become informed. Like social media is another tool being used by patients to research healthcare options. In fact, 90% of Americans look for health-related information on social media, with 41% of patients saying that social media influences their choices. And talking about health online is a growing trend, especially with the younger demographic who are twice as likely to use social media to discuss their health. And once a patient gets to your website, they want consistent and valuable content. With 94% of Americans seeking out health information, about specific questions and conditions, you want your website, your content to be, where they find the answer. Why? Again, because 71% of patients will search for a new provider if the website is lacking information. And because the website is increasingly seen also as a source of medical advice. So with 69% of millennial patients checking the internet for early medical advice instead of speaking to their primary care physician, they will speak to, but their first step is going online and trying to find information online. Whether it's patient acquisition or it's patient retention, consumerization means that we expect your services to be available digitally. And this really is the new standard. In 2021, with survey, 51% of patients said that they prefer a digital connection, either online or on an app, for 5 key interactions, scheduling an appointment, filling out forms, asking provider questions, paying bills. accessing their personal health information records, again, online. And with 94% of patients saying they are willing to switch to a new practice, if they offer online appointment scheduling and their current one doesn't, it's definitely a consideration. And it's not just appointment scheduling. 75% of patients said they were willing to switch providers if virtual services were lacking. So patients expect more online. And what this translates to is greater complexity. Complexity in that you need to be offering better digital services and also more of them. And also, complexity in how you manage and deliver content to those range of services and experiences. So let's look at this in a bit more detail. Let's map the challenge by first looking at, all of the content that you need to be juggling with in healthcare. So naturally, there's, provider profiles, the workhorse of patient acquisition, the doctor, medical staff profiles with information, about qualifications, specializations, experiences. We've got clinical practice areas. We have location details, patient information, including things like visitor info, FAQs, content within patient portals. We've got the health library. So if patients have questions on symptoms, causes, want to know about diagnostics and testing, treatments, procedures, drugs, then a robust health library is invaluable content for SEO and for capturing, patients as they do their own research, which we know they're doing. We also have information for medical professionals, for staff, for recent events. Hopefully we've got real life stories from communities and patients who have experienced, patient-centered care from our organization. We definitely want testimonials and reviews because we know that, again, people are shopping around, shoppers are going to shop. And then there's going to be sort of your typical information around, about us, history, mission, career information for jobs. And then finally, all the fun, legal, billing and insurance types of content. So needless to say, this is a lot of content. And what you see here is just a subset of the likely suspects. And it's not just the volume of content that's tricky, but also, content operations will vary across all these types. And what do I mean by that? Well, different teams might work on different content areas. Content might be coming from different tools. Content types might have different workflow stages. And if all that wasn't bad enough, if we sort of spread these out a little bit, we can see that, there are many content relations to manage across these. For example, patient information is very likely to showcase or link to provider information. Community and patient stories will ideally call out testimonials and reviews. And in reality, when you look at the relations across your content, there are many, many content relationships to manage. It's more like this. And in terms of where all of this content might go, the increased expectations of patients online has translated to an increase in, channels consuming your content, places where you want your content to go to try to attract and acquire patients. So let's now look at these and add these to the picture. So first channel is going to be your digital properties, not just your public website, but, this could be your microsites. It could be a mobile app. It should also be maybe internal assets, internal sites for your staff, like maybe your intranets or internal consumers, increasingly internal consumers, like perhaps, your own AI agents operating across your content for chats. Next, definitely search and listings. So it's critical that content like provider and location information ranks high on search and online listings, because we know that's where people are going first. They're searching. Content marketing. So not just on your blog, but, also producing different types of assets, like maybe producing white papers, ebooks, infographics from content. Email marketing, with sending targeted and personalized emails to patients and potential patients about services, promotions, health tips, and more. Like, despite being traditional, we all have a love-hate relationship with our inbox. Email is still a viable healthcare marketing channel with an open rate of just over, like 21%. It's doing okay, and a industry standard sort of click-through rate. Obviously, social media. So social media channels are a large content consumer and they link to key marketing materials, sharing content, interacting with patients, promoting services. Video platforms as well, like YouTube, can be particularly useful for sharing patient testimonials. We have webinars, like what we're doing today, virtual events, hosting online events and seminars or workshops. Again, another channel for your content. And then growing interest around podcasts, like repackaging your information and educational content, and maybe your community and patient stories into an audio format for streaming platforms. And finally, emerging channels. So, like the growing adoption of wearables or leveraging AR and VR for patient education or showcasing procedures or, even therapy. And all of these channels, these are just the trends that we know about now. And who knows, what future channels might consume our content going forward. So this arrow here, it's doing some heavy lifting. Like it's making things look quite simple. If we bring back our relationships amongst our content, where we're going with this, and we extend them now across to our channels, it's looking like spaghetti. This is really more realistic. There's multiple types of content. We've got interrelationships. They're being consumed by multiple channels. And this is really the complexity of managing healthcare content today. Complexity that has you, duplicating content because it's too difficult to reuse, or maybe it's poorly structured. Duplication, which leads to content inconsistencies as things, aren't kept up to date because they're duplicated. And because keeping up to date within an old architecture or outdated platforms can be really resource intensive. We all know that things change fast online, and now that patients want the same level of digital service from healthcare as they get from other industries, like, they're used to purchasing, shopping, self-service, like e-commerce. It's not enough for us to have informational websites. Like we need a digital front door to the services that we offer patients. So how do we address these challenges? Like what can be done? The challenge of needing to innovate, of keeping up with change and really being more digitally agile, or of delivering to multiple channels without, the content friction that we just sort of highlighted, and evolving our content operations so we don't pull our hair out. Those of us who are lucky enough to have some. Let's look at some recommendations that ultimately address these challenges. We're going to start with managing, the constant need to innovate. How do we address that? Our first recommendation on how you can keep up with the speed of change, coming from the commercialization and consumerization of healthcare is really about going composable. And as for what we're referring to when we say composable, it's really about how you ultimately deliver the digital experience to your different consumers, to your multiple channels. And there are different approaches to delivering digital experiences. It's a bit of a spectrum. We're going to look at sort of like the two extremes. Reality is often somewhere in the middle. When I'm saying or referring to digital experiences, I'm talking about, building your website, your internet, digital marketing campaigns, really anything you've got going on online. And if we unpack the core parts of putting digital experiences together, then, typically they involve us needing something for, content management, asset management, somewhere to manage files, images, and also deliver these, ideally optimized to different channels, search, forms, digital marketing. Like we could keep going, depending on your industry, there will be other specialist areas of concern. So for healthcare, those digital experiences will involve provider management. So we'll set that into our stack and look at this. A common strategy on one end of the spectrum used by organizations is to address all of these concerns, as many as possible, using sort of like an all-in-one approach. So where you have, like a single monolithic platform that meets as best as it can all these sort of disparate needs. Now, given that's a lot to take on, these all-in-one platforms would have different sort of strengths and weaknesses depending on where that particular vendor focused. So, some might have great content features, but perhaps search is a bit basic. Others might have a great search engine, but, say rudimentary asset management. And some would allow you to do things like model custom types, like I'm going to model my providers, but maybe doing things like managing the taxonomy, the relationships between content was a little bit complicated. The composable approach, as the name suggests, looks to meet your exact digital experience needs by bringing together multiple platforms that are specialist in their area of concern. This isn't about, going from one platform to like 5,000. It's just the platforms that you need to meet your needs. And as an example here, platform B can be doing more than one concern, but unlike generalists, it's not trying to do them all. So to talk platforms and services for a moment, with an all-in-one approach, you might be squeezing every last drop out of a platform like Drupal, or you could replace Drupal here with Sitecore or with WordPress. We'll stick with Drupal. With a composable approach, again, you compose the digital platform with platforms and services that more align with your specific needs. So again, example stack, we might use a content platform like content.ai. It's in the cloud, it's software as a service, it's HIPAA compliant. For digital asset management, we might have a specialist platform such as Cloudinary that can manage assets more broadly than just the websites. Rather, it can manage assets for your whole organization across all your channels, internal as well. We could use an industry leader, Algolia, for search that far outpaces the native search features and things like Drupal, Sitecore, and WordPress. And we could add a HIPAA compliant form as a service platform, of which there are several. So Jotform is just one example of HIPAA compliant forms. And finally, rather than modeling and storing our business critical provider information in a web content system, we can put it in a dedicated healthcare solution, something like CaaS, which, as you can see here on our work with Prisma Health, and Prisma being a private nonprofit health company, the largest healthcare organization in South Carolina. Much of the site you're looking at here is built on an Experience platform, but the provider search and listings is powered by CaaS. So, we can do a search, we can see the results, we've got facets and filters, and maybe we can use those to narrow down our choices and ultimately find the provider that we want and, schedule an appointment with them. Again, there's multiple platforms here, the provider information being on CaaS. They have, out of the box experiences. You can also use the API. So in what way, because remember the problem was innovation, what way does going composable sort of promote or help with innovation? It's linked to how we manage change and the challenges that come from that. So let's go back to our two approaches, the all-in-one and the composable approach. Let's say, content management doesn't meet our needs. So maybe, we need more flexible workflow so we can bring, more of our team into our content platform and, out of Word or Google Docs. Or maybe it is about innovation. Maybe we want to move away from our current content platform because we're looking for something that brings in more generative AI features. Well, with the all-in-one approach, if we aim to replace Drupal, the impact won't just be here, but rather potentially across all concerns, certainly more concerns than we want it to be across. With a composable approach, however, we can more easily isolate services, find a platform that meets our needs and bring that into the stack without as broad an impact to other areas, that we aren't looking to change. So it looks super simple on a slide, but I know what you're thinking. Surely we can't just plug and play tech. Well, with the complexity of delivering digital experiences having grown over the past decade, there is a strategy and an architecture that can significantly reduce the complexity of doing such a swap. And it's coming from other industries that move faster, like e-commerce. So it does that really by ensuring greater interdependence, or independence, between the parts of the composable stack. So making them more independent. How do we make them more independent? This is based on the following design principles that you will now find in modern enterprise technology. So you go out looking, go shopping, these sort of principles underpin sort of most modern platforms. So the first is, again, that idea of specialist platforms. So they refer to as microservices. They're going to be independent. And these services are going to be built from the ground up with APIs, application programming interfaces, so ways to communicate with the platform. And ideally, all functionality should be exposed by that. We're going to be adopting a cloud native approach. So moving from software that you have to manage and upgrade and install and hotfix and spend your dollars on, doing those activities whenever you're not managing software, you shouldn't be, to something that's more software as a service and hosted in the cloud. And finally, where possible, using headless services, which we're going to unpack later. But as you can see here, the focus being on, again, the separation between the service and the front end, which we'll get into. So it's suggested by what's underlined here, MACH, this approach to enterprise architecture is referred to as MAC. That's something you can find out more about on macalliance.org. Lots of software as a service platforms are certified as MAC and adhere to these principles. And given a picture's worth 1,000 words, just really quickly break down MAC. So again, we've got our different platforms and services that we need based on our needs. So in MAC, these are the microservices. In terms of how they communicate, it's all going to be done through APIs and orchestration. The API is key, so they're API first. And where possible, we lean on platforms and services that are software as a service. So they're in the cloud, which is being called out by the wee cloud icon at the top. And, this means that they're cloud native. And finally, we have a range of channel consumers, website, intranet, social media, you name it. They're getting what they need from these APIs. So with this separation, the architecture is using a headless approach. So that's the sort of the Mac architecture. To summarize a few benefits of going composable. So again, why go down this approach? First, it is about better aligning your needs, technology with your needs. And that's because you can compose the stack you actually need rather than investing and maintaining, definitely on the maintaining part, like a monolithic platform. You're paying for stuff that you're not using. But should those needs change, and they will change, greater flexibility and agility to swap out and to innovate and to use new services, to experiment with new services. And this obviously encourages innovation. Improved user experiences. So again, through the use of specialist platforms that innovate more than generalists, you benefit and your end users benefit from more modern features and functionality. Search is a prime example where platforms like Algolia can do a lot more than what native platforms can do. With cloud native software as a service, there's going to be cost efficiency through the stack. Like the vendor hosts the software, they upgrade it, they maintain it, and to compete in the market, they secure it thoroughly. So, keeping it compliant with standards like SOC 2, bunch of ISO standards, HIPAA, PCI. And finally, with multiple services, there's reduced vendor lock-in as well. Okay, so on to the next of our challenges with meeting patient expectations online and being able to carry out, marketing strategies to acquire them. And that's delivering to multiple channels. So our recommendation here is to go headless for multi-channel content management. And so what do we mean by headless? It's a term, that's often thrown around in tech marketing as a cure for all ills, which it isn't. But we're going to look a bit more deeply at the challenges that it does solve. We're going to start by defining what the head is and how that relates to someone visiting a website. So let's build out a headed platform here on the left. Here we have a browser. When a user requests a page, that request goes to a web content management system. So on this side, the left-hand side, we're going to look at the traditional old web content management system. And if we look inside the CMS, we're going to find, obviously, database for storing the content. CMS is going to have its own user interface. This is where your editors go to edit content, build pages. And deployed alongside the CMS code will be the site code itself. So all get stuck together. So for example, I'm referring to things like, templates, components, styling, all the stuff that when combined with the content makes the page. And it's this rendering layer that's in the platform that glues all of this stuff together. So these two things, the code specific to the site and the rendering layer that combines all that content with the code to build a page that the user ultimately consumes. This is what we refer to as the head. It's the visual bit. The web CMS builds the requested page, and it returns it to the user. So in summary, with a headed approach, our web CMS not only holds the content, but also the code for the site. And it puts that together to render the page for the end user. CMS is, it's the content platform and it's the web channel as well. Now let's compare this to, the headless CMS. Yes, there's going to be somewhere to stick your content, your assets. Likewise, it has a user interface, admin area for offering and publishing content. Here, however, is our key difference with the more traditional web CMS. The headless CMS provides an API so that consumers can access content. You don't deploy your site code alongside the CMS code. You're also having to manage and pay for upgrades, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't have a rendering layer for the web channel. It's headless. Anything that can communicate with the API and has access can consume the content. So that can be a website or multiple websites or an app or digital signage, social media, email marketing, a back office integration, for example. Any of these channels and more. What these channels do with the content, how they render it, is up to the channel. So in this way, a headless platform is channel agnostic. For example, we can have a website channel consuming the content via the API. The head, our code and rendering layer are part of a separate application. They're not part of the CMS. We can have an app like powering, an AI chat experience consuming the content via the API. And the same thing applies. The head is a separate application. Because the code is, separate from the CMS, both of these channels can be built on entirely different technologies. Your site could be something like Next or apps on React Native. And this is another advantage to the headless approach. It's technology agnostic. Like, here's a big bonus in moving to a content platform that works with multiple channels. The separation between content, how it's consumed, and how it's rendered, thanks to being headless, leads to other advantages. With a traditional web CMS, and you will all experience this when it's time to do a new website, and you're maybe going to another platform, that typically involves replacing the entire stack, having to invest in things like content migration and other headaches as well. With headless, if you want to redesign and launch a new website, you only need to undertake a new website redesign. Your content in the platform above can stay where it is. You don't need to migrate. You're limiting the impact to just that channel. Again, in a world where you might be having your content consumed by multiple channels. Bonus factoid, and I'm aware that after this, you'll probably be able to take an exam on headless. This is more headless information you wanted to know, but something to be aware of. Given the popularity of the headless approach, we have seen some web CMSs. So on the left, platforms are beginning to offer headless as a feature. So these are often referred to as hybrid CMS. So they still provide a rendering layer for the web channel, but they have now added an API. And this can be used to service other channels, including web. But just be aware that, as an add-on and as something that you typically have to host, you're still in that world of hosting, or at least maintaining and upgrading their code. This API within the hybrid CMS won't be as performant or scalable as this API, which is built from scratch as the core engine of a native headless CMS. So to summarize the benefits of going with a headless approach, it's built for multi-channel content delivery. You are practically future-proofing your content. The next time you redesign your website, you don't need to migrate. Your content stays on the platform that serves your entire organization. You have the freedom to use any technology, which again is going to help with embracing innovation in the future. We don't know how things will change, but we know that they will. So again, this provides you those opportunities. And thanks to the Mac architecture that we talked about earlier, headless platforms are, they're built for integrating with others and for extending, ultimately to meet your needs. So with headless, we can get content out to all the channels our prospective patients are visiting and interacting with. But how can we evolve our content operations to make producing all that channel content more manageable? Our next recommendation is really about going beyond headless and to adopt you kind of think of it as it's like its bigger brother, so to speak, a thing called like content as a service. When Headless first came out, it was really developer focused. And there are platforms on the market today for which, this is still the case. Content as a service includes Headless, and, by doing that will please the developer audience. The critical difference is really around the features and functionality and attention given to content producers. So your editors, your marketers, your translators. And as we explore now, content as a service, we're going to look at a few platforms that we partner with here at Reason One. So let's have a quick look at these now. First, we have Content.ai. This was the first headless CMS platform that we used at our agency. It's truly a heavy hitter when it comes to leveling up your content operations. Content.ai, it's been in the headless market since 2015 and was actually the internal startup within another CMS company that dates back to 2004. So they really understand the world of content. So logging in to the software as a service, we've got, a central content repository for all our channels. We can edit structured content. It's been modeled to meet our needs. And for the web channel, we can edit content within the context of pages and components. So this is Content.ai. Another content as a service platform that we look at, or we're going to look at in this section, is Contentful. And we have a few active healthcare projects right now for health systems and hospitals that have moved to the composable architecture that we previously talked about, and for which Contentful is the selected content as a service platform. Founded in 2013, Contentful is very well established and mature offering in the market. So go to their site and logging in, again, similar concerns. You're going to see a content repository where we can edit content through like a form interface, or we can go to like a live preview and we can edit the web channel directly. So this is Contentful. Finally, we'll be taking a peek at Storyblok, and this is the most recent of the three to enter the market in 2017. We just launched over 50 websites for a member-based association on Storyblok, but all content managed in a single content repository. So again, sort of 50 channels, singular content. And we'll jump into Storyblok here, just so you can have a quick peek. And again, Storyblok's got a content repo. They use folders for management, but from day one, they've been all about visual page building. So you're straight into seeing the channel. When you can come in, you can go and you can edit content. And this is actually our website. Now, bit of a diversion. Seeing the website directly in the admin area of the content as a service platform might have some of you thinking, aren't these things meant to be separate? Didn't we just go through like a whole thing on Headless where you said keeping content, channel code, design, templates, and all separate had all of these amazing benefits? Well, although everything is brought together in the editing interface for content editors, you have to sort of look at the angle, look at the side. These two things, the admin interface, the admin application, the preview website are still separate, and they're communicating through the API. Our preview website, built in whatever tech we want, hosted wherever we want it. And the cloud hosted admin area is managed by the vendor and can communicate to the preview site. So with this model, we're getting all of the benefits of Headless with a unified editing experience as well. Now, let's get back to content as a service, and we're going to look more closely at what's in the box, whereas you won't be surprised to find out the focus is purely on content. And given it includes Headless CMS, it's going to come with sort of those necessary defaults, such as the ability to model out the types of content that you need to store on the platform, which really can be anything at all. You can have your key content serving all channels, provider information, clinical practice areas, locations, the sort of content that really shouldn't be stuck in a traditional web CMS. And then other types of content that are channel specific, such as, hero banner, call to action. You can structure that content however you need with text fields, rich text, multiple choice. And importantly, you can make relationships between types of content, like relating, providers to services. It's easier to manage those relationships. As we've seen, they all have an authoring environment that you can go in and manage the content. And many provide localization, certainly the three that we're looking at today. And now that you're all familiar with API first approach and how important those APIs are, they naturally provide very robust APIs so the channel consumers can access content. Here's a term that may or may not be familiar with webhooks. So there are times when you work with content where you might want to trigger something to happen in another platform. For example, I publish content, I might want to send a notification to Slack or MS Teams. How do we trigger events? Well, we do that through what's called webhooks. Webhooks are very handy for getting the different platforms in our stack to work together when the sky's really the limit on what you can accomplish. For example, how about using them to kick off automated translations? So here we have an overview on anemia that's ready for translation. We've set up the workflow so that there's an explicit translate content item workflow step, and that fires a webhook to send the content to Microsoft's cloud translation services. So I push the button here to move it to the workflow step, and in the background, the content is sent to the translation service. It's translated, and then it's sent back to content.ai. And you can see the content item has now moved to a review automatic translation step on the wee banner at the top. So now that's been translated, we can toggle to the different languages for the content item. We can have a look at the Spanish that's being sent back from the translation service. And we can also have a look at the French, which we also got back from the service as well. So when it comes to patient acquisition, your digital front door obviously needs to be speaking your patient's preferred language. We still recommend having a native language speaker involved in translation, but you can see how AI translation services are rapidly improving and can really shorten the lead time in producing localized variations for your target markets. And this integration, again, being kicked off from a webhook, which you can set up in the platform. You can set it up to be triggered on all sorts of different events like workflow or API events as well. Really, the sky's the limit. Next, developers are going to want software development kits so they can code for any of the channels that they're building. And given the content platform is just one part of the puzzle when it comes to digital experience, you're going to want, a solid marketplace of integrations to the rest of the stack, such as the one that Contentful has. And you can see here, it's got a wide variety of categories, including artificial intelligence, or we've also got marketing apps. We also have optimization and personalization. And again, you have the ability to bring in and integrate with platforms and services that meet your exact needs. Finally, on the CMS side and Headless CMS side, we want to follow best practices and have a pipeline in place for both content and development. So you can think of like dev, QA, stage, and production. And this is what Environments brings. Now let's look at content as a service. So what it adds to bring Headless from a developer-friendly tool to something that can really elevate your content operations so that your teams, can create and optimize patient experiences. First, the ability to model custom workflows so that they map to your content governance needs, across your different types of content, across your channels. It's all very well having, a basic workflow like edit, approve, and publish. But if you hope to get more content producers, into your content platform, you need more flexibility in designing, the content pipeline. So we're going to check out workflows in content.ai. So here in my workflow, do things like give it a name, say what content it applies to. I can start designing the workflow steps. So for this one, I've got, draft review. There's the translation steps that we just pushed content through, approval step, scheduling, publishing, archive. Within an individual step, I can configure, where it goes next and what can transition into this current step. I can also configure, who has permissions to work within a step. I can make changes, like removing a role, and then when I'm happy with that, I can save my workflow and it'll be updated. One workflow is grand, but obviously being able to create specific workflows aligned to your content operations will allow for more content work to happen in the platform and increase overall ROI. So for example, we can make, workflow unique to managing, say, provider content. So setting this to be operating within the provider content type and editing the workflow steps to create, say, new steps specific to the provider content type. So you might add one in, for example, to say, put a certain point in the workflow, we want to push updates to CaaS. Next, we've got collaboration. all it takes is more than one person and you're going to benefit from these features. So features like, commenting. So here on this anemia article, I'm going to add this comment. This line feels a little bit out of place. So let's add that comment and notify our editor who's working alongside us, who's been assigned to this content type. We can also suggest edits, that notify the person this content is assigned to. So here I'm going to suggest an edit for this line. And again, we're still within the content platform, not bouncing off the word. But if I log in as, the other person and go to the same content, the banner at the top, first of all, notifies me that someone is actively working on the same content. So here we have this idea of sort of simultaneous editing. But I can respond to things that they have added. So, maybe I'm going to respond to this comment. Perhaps I quite like the line. So I can keep a thread, start a thread on this content. I can accept the suggested change that they put in earlier and the content item will be updated. And given, more than one person is active on this content item right now, if I make a change, so I've just made a change there, we go back to the other person, the other editor is notified about, the field that's just changed and they can refresh to update it. So again, more collaboration features. Place where many organizations fall down, is on content planning, like what's getting work done, what's the progress of our content, what's delayed, outdated, scheduled, published. Like somebody might know, but not everybody can be informed. Your content platform really should be able to answer these questions. And here in content.ai, we have a few handy features for keeping up to date and reviewing our content plan. So in this project overview, we can see planning status, an overview of where content is in workflow, what's on track. We can have a look. We can jump to that content. What's delayed and needs action. We can have a look here as well. What's waiting for approval. So we can go down to our workflow step and go to waiting for approval, and we can see content here as well and take action if needs be. We can also toggle by language to see, the state of our plan across localizations if we're working with multiple languages. We also have very handy editorial calendar, a useful view to look at the schedule. And we can see it here. And we can also switch from this calendar view to, an agenda view as well. And we can see content, their associated dates and their current status. So we can see that this one is delayed. This one down here it's on track for Friday. And we can refine, the view by a whole host of filter properties. So for example, type of content. So all in all, like a really great way to view how content operations are proceeding and have a unified view that everybody can access and see what's going on. Next, to bring into the platform task management. So again, tasks that are assigned to me or tasks I'm assigning to other members. So I can add a task on any content item in the platform. I can assign it to a person. I can set a due date and give it, a better time here. And then I can set that task and you'll see this got added to the content item. So 17 hours to get this one done. Now I logged in as that user. I have handy views like, content that's, recently edited by me or content that has been assigned to me, but also I have my tasks as well. So you'll see the list of tasks here, which I can select, go to the content item and check offline complete. And yes, as you can imagine, behind this, notifications are also sent to inboxes as well when tasks are created and assigned. Next, almost as important as having content go multiple channels is this idea of assets doing the same. So working across multiple channels can make asset management, a real headache, but it's critical to optimize things like images for the channel. Like you have to optimize to get the best performance for your site. And performance, obviously, is a critical part of user experience and an important SEO factor for patient acquisition. Your site's got to be fast. Your assets got to be optimized. You'll do better in search. You'll get found. So now, headless CMS platforms typically allow for asset storage, images, PDFs, etc. Mature content as a service platforms will provide more advanced features. So you can avoid creating all those thumbnails or duplicating files across channels. So we'll check out Storyblok and their asset management. I can organize assets into folders. I can, say, let's pick this image here. I get an overview of its properties. I can also handily see, what other content is referencing it. And I can open it up in the built-in image editor to make changes. So maybe I want to, crop this image and make fine-tuned sort of changes as well. So I can come in here and maybe I might want to alter things like, the temperature, but it's looking a bit weird. Don't quite like that. So I'll revert. Quite like the crop though. So we'll put the crop back in. So once I'm happy with this, I can save it, or I can, save a new image as well. So we'll save it as a new image. We can give it a name, but we also have handy features like this, being able to add security to make the asset private. I can schedule, things like a publish date for assets. So not just scheduling publishing for content, but scheduling publishing for assets as well. And before I go to upload, it's letting me know that I'm missing required fields. In this case being the alt text, which our editors should add so that our image is accessible and can, provide described context for those who require it. When it comes to images, you only need to upload a single high quality file. The channel, so for example, your website that requests the variations, such as thumbnails, it should know what it needs. So it will request what it needs based on the design requirements for that channel. If you need another format, the channel can request the format whenever it asks for the image. So here we're asking for WebP. If we need a black and white variation, again, the channel can request the image with a grayscale filter, and the image is created on demand and cached for future use. How about those thumbnails? Again, you guessed it, request the image, passing in the dimensions that you need. And if your site design changes and you need a different, slightly bigger thumbnail, then again, new work for your editors, the channel can request a new thumbnail that your site performance continues to be optimized. And there are a whole bunch of different features and optimizations that you can do whenever the channel is requesting these images. And you'll get them in Storyblok, Content.ai, and also in Contentful as well. But if the features in the content as a service platform don't meet your needs, then obviously that whole idea about Composable, we should be able to swap in a digital asset management platform. Take, for example, Cloudinary, which is one of the leaders in the industry. As a specialist platform, has many features and is always enhancing their products. For example, they've recently rolled out AI features as well. Now, using a separate digital asset management tool doesn't mean your editing team have to be bouncing around different platforms to get content work done. Platforms like Content.ai and Cloudinary have integrations. So you can be in Content.ai and directly open up Cloudinary's asset selector, pick your images, save it to your content, and then your content works continue as is. Again, I'm not bouncing around platforms here. I'm just in content and it's integrating. Headless is channel agnostic and can send content anywhere. That's great, but sending to all channels doesn't get around the need to manage and build experience for specific channels. And with the web being the number one, you're going to want to preview. And pretty much all Headless platforms have the ability to open up a preview when working with content. They tend to just fire open, the content in a new tab. So it's a bit of back and forth. Whereas content as a service platforms go one step further, as we've shown before. So in Contentful, I'm going to make edits to my homepage and I want to do that side by side. I can jump into the live preview and I can preview in mobile, check out the experience there. I can, toggle back to desktop as well. And if I'm previewing different languages, I have multiple localizations, for example, then I can do that within the live preview. And I can go through here, I can check out the page and I can edit things, edit content in place. So I can reorder components by doing drag and drop and the page will automatically update, again, the preview of this build. So I can change that order. And I can also do things like live edit. So I'm in here, I'm editing content, and you'll see on the right-hand side that that title is updating as I type. Finally, content as a service platforms have been rolling out generative AI to boost productivity, which is a natural fit at this time, as an assistant rather than something that you should let run wild across your content. Much like having, a native language speaker review an AI generated translation, it's critical that any generated content is obviously reviewed for accuracy. So I might, for example, think that this summary is a little childish. And in Content.ai, we've got AI features where I can come here and I can say, make this sound more professional. And then what's going to happen is it's going to call off to the API call and bring back this text, which I can decide to swap in or I can copy. And, there are other handy features as well, like this overview here that you're seeing is, it's way too long. So I can use AI to come in and to summarize that as well. In terms of benefits of using, content as a service, you're going to get all of the benefits of headless, but again, you have that ability or the benefit of modernizing your content operations. And also they're beginning to put in AI features as well. So a lot to take in and lots of opportunity to innovate digitally and meet the growing expectations of your patients, expectations that are only going to increase as patients take more of the lead on their healthcare journey. And it really is an exciting time. There's just so much choice today, and that's both a good thing, but also a challenge to navigate, which is where shameless plug, Reason One can help. If you're looking to innovate and meet future needs by going composable, you're interested in delivering to multiple channels with headless, or you feel that now is the time to really level up on your content operations, then our full service agency is here to help. When it comes to, those considerations, we offer, a platform evaluation engagement that's focused on aligning your tech stack with your organizational goals, really about answering the questions like what approach should we use to deliver digital experiences? And within that approach, what are the right platforms and services? And you can find out more on our website at reasononinc.com/platform-evaluation-services. You can check out different types of engagements and reach out to us there. So that's a wrap. I want to thank you for your time today, and I hope that the information presented was useful. We covered a wide variety of topics. So some of them we went in really deep. You, again, will be able to take an exam on headless, but I want to thank you for your time. And if you want to connect with us, here's our information. Happy to continue the conversation.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael, for a great presentation. And I want to thank Reason One for also sponsoring this month's webinar. You will be receiving a copy of the presentation tomorrow. So if you don't receive your copy, please reach out and let me know and I'll get you a copy. And as a reminder, we do have that short survey at the end that we would really appreciate your feedback on. So I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. And once again, thank you, Michael.